Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, walking to your mailbox, and finding a single, thin white envelope with the Social Security Administration logo in the upper left-hand corner. For millions of Americans, this specific envelope represents a ticking time bomb, a source of anxiety so profound that it keeps them up until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling and wondering if their financial lifeline is about to be cut. This is not fear-mongering. This is the reality of the Continuing Disability Review, or CDR, a process that is currently undergoing a massive, under-the-radar transformation that could jeopardize the benefits of honest, disabled Americans. Over the last few days, a significant shift has occurred within the internal gears of the Social Security Administration, a change detailed in an immediate release dated March 12th that has largely gone unnoticed by the mainstream media. But here at Senior Security Benefits, we do not let these things slide. We dig into the regulations, we analyze the procedural changes, and we bring you the truth about what is happening behind the closed doors of government bureaucracy. This change affects how your disability is reviewed, who reviews it, and ultimately whether you keep your check or lose it. If you are not on disability, you might think this doesn't apply to you, but life is unpredictable. A drunk driver running a red light or a sudden genetic condition can change your status in a heartbeat. For those who are currently relying on these benefits to survive, this new protocol is a critical development that demands your full attention. To understand the gravity of this situation, we first need to dissect what a continuing disability review actually is, beyond the acronyms and government jargon. When you fight the long, exhausting battle to get approved for Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, or Supplemental Security Income, SSI, you are finally granted a sense of relief. You receive an award letter stating that the government agrees. Your medical condition prevents you from engaging in what they call substantial gainful activity. They calculate your monthly benefit, and for a moment, you feel safe. However, that safety is conditional. The government attaches a string to that approval, a caveat that says they reserve the right to check in on you periodically to see if you have medically improved. This is the CDR. It is not a one-time event. It is a recurring audit of your physical and mental health. Depending on the severity of your condition and the likelihood of recovery, these reviews are scheduled on a strict rotation, every year for some, every 3 years for others, or every 5 to 7 years for those with more permanent conditions. This system is designed to catch fraud, yes, but in practice, it often catches innocent people in a net of confusion and paperwork. The government views these reviews as a massive money-saving enterprise. This is the cold, hard economic reality that we must confront at Senior Security Benefits. According to internal data, for every single dollar the Social Security Administration spends on processing a CDR, they save approximately $9 in future benefits. Why? Because the process results in people being kicked off the rolls. It is a return on investment that incentivizes the agency to conduct as many reviews as their budget allows. This creates an adversarial relationship between the beneficiary and the agency. You are not just a patient or a client. You are a line item in a budget that they are trying to reduce. Up until very recently, there was a system of checks and balances in place regarding who actually conducted these reviews. Since the inception of the disability program, there was a great compromise between the federal government and the states. The local Social Security field office would handle the administrative side, making sure you were still meeting the income rules, but the actual medical decision was outsourced to state agencies known as Disability Determination Services, or DDS. These state agencies are staffed with medical examiners and doctors who know the local hospital systems, understand regional health trends, and have specialized training in evaluating medical records. This brings us to the massive change that has triggered so much concern. The Social Security Administration has announced that they are moving to process these medical CDRs in-house, instead of sending them to the specialized state agencies that have been doing this work for decades. On the surface, they might claim this is about efficiency or utilizing available capacity, but when you peel back the layers, a much more troubling picture emerges. Social Security is currently operating at a 50-year low in terms of staffing. If you have tried to call the National 800 number or your local office recently, you know this reality intimately. You face hour-long hold times, dropped calls, and overworked employees who are often too burned out to provide accurate answers. This is an agency that has been gutted by attrition, hiring freezes, and budget cuts. Yet the powers that be have decided that this depleted workforce, which is already struggling to process initial applications and retirement claims, should now take on the complex medical task of reviewing disability cases. They are taking a task that requires specialized medical adjudication skills and handing it to generalist federal employees who are being given a crash course, essentially a one-page primer, on how to determine if someone is still disabled. Let's illustrate this with a hypothetical scenario to show you why this is dangerous. Imagine a woman named Sarah. Sarah is 55 years old and worked as a nurse for 30 years before a degenerative disc disease made it impossible for her to stand or lift patients. She went through the grueling 2-year process to get approved for disability. Her condition is complex. It involves chronic pain, nerve damage, and secondary depression. Under the old system, when her review came up, her file would go to a state agency. A trained medical examiner would look at her MRI results, read the notes from her specialist, and understand the nuance of her condition. Now, under this new in-house proposal, Sarah's file might land on the desk of a general Social Security employee who has spent the last 5 years processing retirement applications or issuing Social Security cards. This employee is under immense pressure to clear their desk. They look at Sarah's file, see that she went to the doctor a few times less than last year, and perhaps misinterpret a note about her pain management. Lacking the deep medical training of the state agency staff, they might make a hasty decision or flag her file for a cessation of benefits. The nuance is lost, and Sarah is thrown into a panic. This shift is compounded by the quota system that governs how local offices operate. We have deep insider knowledge here at Senior Security Benefits regarding how these offices are managed. Every fiscal year, Congress allocates a specific budget for program integrity work, which includes CDRs. This budget trickles down from the headquarters in Baltimore to the regional offices and finally to the local field managers. A local manager might be told, "Your office must complete exactly 100 medical reviews this month." It is not a suggestion, it is a mandate. They cannot do 99, and they get no extra credit for doing 101. They must hit the target exactly. To ensure they hit this target, the office will often send out more forms than necessary, perhaps 200 forms to get 100 responses, knowing that some people will have moved, some will ignore the mail, and some will ask for extensions. This means there is a roulette wheel aspect to the process. You might receive a review form not because your health has triggered a flag, but simply because your local office needed to send out 10 more letters to meet their monthly quota. This leads us to the potential fallout of bringing this work in-house. We are already hearing whispers from inside the agency that staff are being reassigned from other critical duties, like fixing computer systems or processing appeals, to handle these medical reviews. This is a classic case of robbing Peter to pay Paul. By shifting inexperienced staff to cover medical reviews, they are creating a bottleneck of incompetence. The state agencies, despite their own backlogs, have established procedures. They have relationships with consultative exam doctors, the independent physicians who assess you if your medical records are incomplete. Does the local Social Security office have a Rolodex of doctors ready to perform exams? Do they have the administrative infrastructure to request and pay for thousands of pages of medical records from hospitals? The answer, largely, is no. They are trying to build the plane while flying it, and the passengers, you, the beneficiaries, are the ones at risk of a crash. The danger here is twofold. First, there is the risk of wrongful termination of benefits due to error. If an untrained employee misreads a file, you could face a cessation notice, forcing you to file an appeal and potentially go months without your income while you fight to prove you are still disabled. Second, there is the risk of bureaucratic limbo. Because these offices are understaffed, your paperwork might arrive at the office and simply sit there. It could be lost, filed incorrectly, or delayed for months. You might send in your update thinking you have complied, only to receive a nasty letter 3 months later claiming you failed to cooperate because the person who opened your mail didn't log it into the computer system correctly before being reassigned to a different department. This creates a cycle of stress that can exacerbate the very medical conditions that qualified you for disability in the first place. However, despite this grim landscape, we at Senior Security Benefits advocate for a very specific philosophy to handle this stress. We call it the FCF method. It stands for forget about it, complete it, forget about it. This is your psychological armor against the bureaucracy. The first forget about it applies to the anticipation. Many people live their lives in fear of the mailbox, checking their My Social Security account daily to see if a review is pending. They let the fear of a potential review ruin their actual lives. You must stop this. Remember the allocation system we discussed? Even if your diary date is up, even if it has been exactly 3 years since your last review, you might not get a letter. If your local office doesn't have the budget allocation to review you this month, they won't. There are thousands of people in your zip code on disability. The chances of your number being pulled are statistical, not personal. Worrying about it will not change the government's budget allocation. So forget about it until the envelope actually arrives. The C stands for complete it. If and when that envelope does arrive, you must act. Do not ignore it. Ignoring a CDR is the fastest way to lose your benefits, not because you aren't disabled, but because of failure to cooperate. When you fill out the form, whether it is the short form update or the long form medical review, be honest, be consistent, and be thorough. Make photocopies of everything. We cannot stress this enough. In a system prone to losing paperwork, your photocopy is your insurance policy. If you can, send it via certified mail so you have a receipt. Once you have dropped it in the mail, you move to the final F. Forget about it again. You have done your part. You have complied with the federal requirement. Agonizing over whether you crossed every T or dotted every I, or staying up until 2 a.m. wondering if you should have phrased an answer differently, serves no purpose. As we mentioned, offices often send out more forms than they can process to ensure they hit their quotas. There is a legitimate chance that your file, once returned, will be scanned and simply archived because the office met its quota with the first 50 replies and didn't need yours to hit the number. You might be stressing over a document that is destined for the shredder. In addition to the CDR changes, there is another major transition that occurred on March 7th, known as workload mobility. This is another piece of the puzzle that fits into the broader destabilization of the agency. Historically, if you lived in Toledo, Ohio, your case was handled by the Toledo field office. You knew where your file was. Under workload mobility, the agency is treating casework like cloud computing. Your disability application or your appeal might be processed by an employee in Salt Lake City, Utah, or Birmingham, Alabama. While this sounds efficient in theory, moving work from busy offices to less busy ones, it disrupts the chain of accountability. If you call your local office to ask about your case, they might look at the screen and say, "I'm sorry, someone in another state has that file checked out, and I can't touch it." This nationalization of the workload was something many insiders advocated for years ago to improve customer service, but the way it is being implemented now, amidst staffing shortages, feels less like an upgrade and more like a scramble to cover up the fact that there aren't enough employees to keep the local offices functioning. This brings us to a critical question from our community, specifically from a viewer we'll call Pickles, who raised a valid concern about the intersection of these changes and vulnerable populations. Pickles asked about the pros and cons of moving CDRs away from state agencies and also expressed worry about access for the visually impaired or those who cannot navigate the digital systems. This touches on the heart of the local office debate. When the current leadership and previous administrations looked at cutting costs, their eyes immediately went to closing physical field offices. They argued that everyone can just do things online. But as Pickles points out, that leaves the most vulnerable behind. The homeless veteran who needs a replacement card cannot use a web portal. The elderly widow who is visually impaired cannot navigate a complex website to file for survivor benefits. These people need a door to walk through and a human to speak to. The shift to in-house CDR processing and workload mobility are potentially stepping stones toward justifying office closures. If the local office isn't processing the local work, why does it need to exist? This is the dangerous logic we are fighting against. There are over 1,200 Social Security offices across the country, and they are the lifeblood of the safety net for millions. We saw pushback when they tried to close offices in the past, and we must remain vigilant. The consolidation of back-end offices has already led to the delays we see today. If they start closing the storefronts in your community, the safety net creates a hole that the most desperate among us will fall through. So what is the verdict on the new in-house CDR process? The cons heavily outweigh the pros. The pros are virtually non-existent for the beneficiary. It saves the government money, but it costs you security. The cons are increased risk of error, lack of medical expertise in the review process, and the potential for a bureaucratic logjam. We are monitoring this situation closely at Senior Security Benefits. We are setting up a system to crowdsource information from you, the viewers. If you receive a CDR form that looks different, or if you are directed to send your information to a new address that isn't the usual state agency, we want to know. By pooling our information, we can track which states are implementing this first and identify patterns of unfair denials before they become a nationwide epidemic. This also applies to Medicaid, which is often tied to your SSI eligibility. The unwinding of Medicaid rules post-pandemic is colliding with these Social Security changes, creating a perfect storm of red tape. You might find yourself fighting on two fronts, trying to keep your monthly check from Social Security while simultaneously trying to prove to the state that you are still eligible for health coverage. It is a nightmare scenario, but it is one we can navigate if we stay informed and stay calm. The most important takeaway is that you are not alone in this. The system is designed to isolate you, to make you feel like a single individual up against a monolithic government machine. But this community, Senior Security Benefits, is here to level the playing field. We understand the codes, the manuals, and the secret changing of the guard that happens in the back offices. While the government tries to save $9 for every $1 they spend by scrutinizing your medical history, we are here to ensure that you don't become a statistic in their savings ledger. If you are currently in the 5 to 7 year diary range, or even the 3-year range, do not panic. The structural incompetence of the agency is, in a strange way, your ally. They simply do not have the manpower to review everyone they are supposed to review. The waiting game is difficult, but it is better than the alternative. Focus on your health, keep seeing your doctors, and ensure that your medical record tells the truth about your daily struggles. That is your best defense. When the paperwork comes, treat it like a tax return, cold, clinical, and precise. Do not offer extra information that wasn't requested. Do not write long, emotional letters in the margins of the form. Nobody reads them, and they can only hurt you by confusing the scanner or the clerk. Stick to the facts. You are disabled. You cannot work. Your condition has not improved. As we move forward into this new era of in-house reviews and workload sharing, we will see hiccups. We will see mistakes. There will be stories of files being sent to the wrong state or decisions being made by employees who don't understand the difference between arthritis and ankylosing spondylitis. But by being aware of these pitfalls now, you are already ahead of the curve. You know that if you get a denial from an in-house review, it might just be a clerical error by an overworked generalist, and that an appeal has a high chance of success. You know that the letter in the mail is part of a quota system, not a personal attack. We are committed to tracking every development of this March 12th announcement. As we gather more intelligence on how the local offices are implementing these in-house reviews, we will share specific strategies on how to fill them out to ensure they bypass the generalist screener and get the medical attention they deserve. Until then, remember the philosophy that keeps us sane. Forget about it until it comes. Complete it with precision when it arrives. And then, forget about it again, knowing you have done everything in your power to protect your benefits. This is a battle of endurance, and with the right information, it is a battle you can win. Stay vigilant, look out for your neighbors who might be struggling with these forms, and keep tuning in to Senior Security Benefits for the latest updates from the front lines of the Social Security system.